What happens when a billionaire CEO shows up at your hotel room door in the middle of the night? Not to fire you, but to save you. At 2:07 a.m., Daniel Hayes made a choice that could have destroyed everything. He opened the door. On the other side stood Isabella Laurent, his boss, a woman worth $9 billion, someone who'd never spoken more than 3 sentences to him in 2 years. She wasn't there to discuss quarterly reports. She was there because she'd overheard a phone call that revealed the one thing Daniel had been desperately hiding. He was breaking. This is a story about power, sacrifice, and the moment when everything you thought you knew about survival gets turned upside down. If you want to see how a single conversation can change 2 lives forever, stay until the end. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The fluorescent lights in the Denver Airport Marriott buzzed like dying insects. Daniel Hayes sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed so hard against his ear that his knuckles had gone white. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 2:04 a.m. in harsh red numbers. "Daddy, my head hurts really bad." Emma's voice cracked on the other end, small and wet with tears. 7 years old. Fever of 103, according to his mother-in-law, Carol, who'd been watching her for the past 3 days while Daniel flew across the country for a conference that might keep him employed for another year. "I know, sweetheart, I know it hurts." Daniel's voice barely held together. "Did Grandma give you the medicine?" "She did, but it still hurts." "When are you coming home?" The question hit him like a fist to the sternum. When was he coming home? His flight wasn't until tomorrow afternoon, 28 hours from now. An eternity when your daughter is crying your name in the dark. "Soon, baby, real soon." "You said that yesterday." "I know, I'm sorry." "Mommy used to put the cold cloth on my head, the one with the pink flowers." Daniel closed his eyes. Sarah had been dead for 18 months. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, gone in 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. Emma still asked for her sometimes, usually when she was sick or scared or both. "Tell Grandma to get that one, okay? She knows where it is." "Okay," Emma sniffled. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Em. So much." Carol's voice came on the line, hushed and strained. "Daniel, I think we should take her to urgent care. This fever isn't breaking. How long has it been since the Tylenol?" 2 hours. "Give it another hour. If it's still above 102, take her in. I'll cover the copay when I'm back." "That's not what I'm worried about." I know you're not." Daniel dragged a hand down his face. The hotel room was a beige box, generic art on the walls, carpet that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and other people's lives. "I'm trying to get home, Carol. I'm doing everything I can." "I know you are, honey. It's just, I have to go. Keep me posted, okay?" He hung up before she could respond, which was a coward's move, and he knew it. Carol had every right to be frustrated with him. She'd been picking up the pieces since Sarah died, watching Emma most weekends, covering school pickups when Daniel's job at Laurent Industries demanded he stay late. Again, and again, and again. Daniel tossed the phone onto the bed and stood up, pacing the narrow strip between the desk and the window. Outside, Denver sprawled in the darkness, 1,000 anonymous lights. He'd been here since Monday. 3 full days of conference sessions he barely remembered, networking events where he'd smiled until his face hurt, and presentations that might as well have been in another language for all the attention he could give them. The only thing that mattered was getting back to Emma. He'd worked for Laurent Industries for 2 years. Started as a mid-level project analyst, got promoted to senior analyst after 8 months when he'd caught a massive accounting error that would have cost the company millions. Isabella Laurent herself had sent him an email. 3 sentences. No greeting, no signature. "Your work on the Sanderson account was noted. Promotion effective immediately. Do not disappoint me." He'd printed that email, framed it, put it on his desk at home like some kind of talisman, proof that he could still build something, still move up, still provide for his daughter, in a world that had taken her mother and kept trying to take everything else. The promotion came with better pay. Not great pay, not by billionaire CEO standards, but enough that he could afford the mortgage, Emma's school, and the medical bills that kept arriving like clockwork, even though Sarah had been gone for over a year. Enough that he could stop lying awake at night doing math in his head, trying to figure out which bill to pay late this month. But the promotion also came with travel, conferences, client meetings, overnight trips that used to be manageable when Sarah was alive, when they could tag team parenting and laugh about whose turn it was to deal with the school fundraiser or the dentist appointment. Now it was just Daniel and Carol and the constant gnawing guilt that he was failing at the only job that actually mattered. His phone buzzed, a text from Carol. Fever down to 101.8. She's sleeping now. Don't worry. Don't worry. Right. Daniel sat back down on the bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The conference ended tomorrow morning with a keynote from Isabella Laurent herself, some talk about innovation and market disruption that he was supposed to attend, supposed to be seen at, because that's what ambitious employees did. They showed up, they paid attention, they acted like their entire world wasn't crumbling 2,000 miles away. He'd booked the cheapest flight he could find, 4:15 p.m. departure, one connection through Dallas, landing in Hartford at 11:30 p.m. He'd be home by 1 in the morning if he was lucky, if there were no delays, if the universe decided to stop kicking him for 5 goddamn minutes. The hotel room was too quiet. Daniel turned on the TV just for the noise, some late-night rerun of a show he didn't recognize, and lay back on the bed, still fully dressed. He should shower. He should sleep. He should do a dozen things that normal people did when they stayed in hotels. Instead, he stared at the ceiling and listened to the low murmur of television voices and thought about Emma's fever and Sarah's funeral and the stack of past due notices tucked into his desk drawer at home. The knock came at 2:07 a.m. 3 soft raps on the hotel room door. Tentative, almost apologetic. Daniel sat up, confused. Room service didn't run this late. He hadn't ordered anything. Housekeeping wouldn't come until morning. For a second, he wondered if he'd imagined it, if exhaustion had finally pushed him into hearing things that weren't there. Then the knock came again, slightly louder this time. He crossed to the door and checked the peephole. Isabella Laurent stood in the hallway. Daniel's brain stuttered. He blinked, looked again, half convinced he was hallucinating. But no, there she was. Dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, wearing jeans and a simple black sweater instead of the tailored suits he'd only ever seen her in. No makeup, no entourage, no bodyguards or assistants or any of the dozen people who usually orbited her like moons around a planet. Just Isabella Laurent, Billionaire CEO, standing outside his hotel room at 2:07 in the morning, looking almost uncertain. Daniel opened the door. Ms. Laurent? I'm sorry to bother you this late. Her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it, not the sharp commanding tone she used in meetings, but something softer, tired. Can I come in for a minute? Every instinct Daniel had screamed that this was wrong, that he should say no, that whatever this was couldn't possibly end well, that billionaires didn't show up at your door in the middle of the night for good reasons. But he stepped aside anyway. Isabella walked into the room, hands shoved into her pockets, and Daniel closed the door behind her. The click of the latch sounded too loud. The room suddenly felt much smaller. I wasn't sure you'd still be awake, she said, not quite looking at him. Yeah, well, having one of those nights. She nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what kind of night he meant. I overheard your phone call earlier in the hotel lobby, around 7. Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd taken Emma's call in the lobby because the conference reception had been too loud and crowded. He'd found a quiet corner near the elevators, tried to keep his voice down, but Emma had been crying, and he'd forgotten to care who might hear. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, Isabella continued. I was walking past and I heard... She paused. I heard you talking to your daughter. Look, if this is about professionalism, or it's not, she finally met his eyes. I wanted to ask if she's okay. Your daughter. The question caught him completely off guard. He'd been bracing for reprimand, for some reminder that Laurent Industries expected its employees to maintain focus even during personal crises. He had not been expecting concern. She's got a fever, Daniel said carefully. My mother-in-law is watching her while I'm here. It's manageable. But you're worried. It wasn't a question. Daniel didn't answer. Isabella looked around the room, at the rumpled bed, the TV still playing quietly, the phone on the nightstand. When's your flight home? Tomorrow afternoon. That's 18 hours from now. I'm aware. She nodded again, something shifting in her expression. I shouldn't have come here. I'm sorry. This was inappropriate. She moved toward the door, and Daniel should have let her go. Should have nodded and said goodnight and forgotten this entire bizarre encounter ever happened. But something in the way she'd said inappropriate, like she'd broken her own rule just by showing up, made him speak. Why did you come? Isabella stopped with her hand on the doorknob. For a long moment, she didn't turn around. Because I heard what you said to her, she finally answered. You told her you'd be home soon, and she said, You said that yesterday. Daniel's throat tightened. And I realized, Isabella continued, still facing the door, that I've built a company where people have to lie to their sick children because they're afraid of losing their jobs. She turned around. The expression on her face was something Daniel had never seen from her before. Not in meetings, not in company-wide emails, not in the handful of times he'd been in the same room with her. It looked almost like shame. I don't know what you want me to say, Daniel managed. I don't want you to say anything. Isabella pulled her hands from her pockets. I want you to go home, tonight, right now. I can't. The keynote tomorrow? Fuck the keynote. Daniel actually flinched. He'd never heard Isabella Laurent swear. Wasn't entirely sure she was capable of it. Your daughter has a fever, Isabella said, and there was something almost fierce in her voice now. She's 7 years old, she lost her mother, and she's asking for her father. Nothing I say tomorrow in that conference hall is worth more than that. With all due respect, Ms. Laurent, you're not the one who'll get fired if I leave early. You're right, I'm not. She crossed her arms. Because I'm the one who does the firing, and I'm telling you to go home. Daniel stared at her. This had to be a test. Some kind of loyalty check, seeing if he'd prioritize work or family, and either answer would be the wrong one because that's how these things always worked. I can't afford to lose this job, he said quietly. You're not going to lose your job. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. I'm the CEO. I can promise whatever the hell I want. The certainty in her voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified him. People with power made promises all the time. They just didn't keep them. Why are you doing this? Daniel asked. Isabella was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its edge. Because someone should have done it for me, a long time ago, and no one did. She walked to the desk, pulled out the hotel notepad and pen, and scribbled something down. Then she tore off the page and held it out to him. That's my personal cell number, not my assistant's number. Mine. When you get home, you send me a text so I know you made it, and then you take the rest of the week off. Paid. Daniel took the paper without thinking. The handwriting was surprisingly messy, almost illegible. I don't understand. You don't have to. Isabella moved back toward the door. Just go be with your daughter. What about the promotion track, the quarterly reviews? I'm supposed to… Daniel! She said his name like she was tired of arguing. I have 1,700 employees. Most of them are terrified of me. Most of them should be, because I'm not a nice person and I don't pretend to be. But I'm also not interested in running a company where good people destroy themselves trying to prove they deserve to exist. She opened the door, paused in the threshold. Your daughter needs you more than I do. Go. And then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving Daniel standing in the middle of his beige hotel room, holding a piece of paper with a phone number that probably cost more per minute than his monthly grocery bill. He looked at the clock. 2:14 a.m. He looked at his phone. He looked at the number Isabella had written down. Then he opened his laptop and started searching for the next flight to Hartford. The airport at 3 in the morning was a strange, liminal place. Too late for the business travelers, too early for the vacation crowds. Just scattered insomniacs and people running from something or toward something, and Daniel wasn't sure which category he fell into. He'd found a flight leaving at 5:50 a.m., direct to Hartford. $800 he definitely didn't have, charged to a credit card that was already close to maxed out. He'd packed in 4 minutes flat, checked out of the hotel, and caught an Uber that cost $60 because of surge pricing. Worth it. All of it worth it if he could get home before Emma woke up. Now he sat at gate B7, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the janitor push a wide mop across the terminal floor. The departures board flickered above him. His flight was on time. Boarding in 45 minutes. His phone buzzed. A text from Carol. She woke up crying again. Fever's back up to 102, taking her to urgent care now. Daniel's chest constricted. He typed back, I'm at the airport. Flying home in an hour. I'll meet you there. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You left the conference early? Yeah. Daniel, you can't keep doing this. You'll lose your job. I won't. You don't know that. He almost typed out the whole story. Isabella showing up, the conversation, the permission to leave, but it sounded insane even in his own head. So instead he just wrote, trust me, I'll explain later. The dots appeared one more time, then stopped. No response. Daniel pocketed his phone and took a sip of bad airport coffee. Around him, the terminal was starting to wake up. A couple arguing quietly near the charging station. A businessman in a wrinkled suit asleep across 3 chairs. A young woman with headphones and a backpack staring at her phone like it held the answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. All of them going somewhere. All of them leaving something behind. Daniel thought about Isabella's face when she'd said, someone should have done it for me. He wondered what she'd left behind, what she was still leaving. His phone buzzed again. Not Carol this time. An unknown number. This is Isabella, making sure you actually left. Daniel stared at the text for a solid 10 seconds before his brain caught up. She'd given him her number. Of course she'd expect him to have hers. He typed, at the airport, flight boards in 40 minutes. The response came immediately. Good. Let me know when you land. You don't have to. I'm aware of what I have to do. Let me know anyway. Daniel found himself almost smiling. Even at 3 a.m, via text message, Isabella Laurent was giving orders. Will do. And thank you. 3 dots appeared. Stayed there for a long time. Then, don't thank me yet. We'll talk when you're back. That should have worried him. Probably did worry him, somewhere under the exhaustion and anxiety and desperate need to get home. But right now, watching the sky outside the terminal windows start to shift from black to deep blue, Daniel couldn't bring himself to care about future consequences. Emma needed him. And for the first time in 2 years, someone with actual power had told him it was okay to go. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom. Good morning, folks. We'll begin boarding for Flight 447 to Hartford in just a few minutes. Please have your boarding passes ready. Daniel stood up, threw away his coffee, and pulled out his phone one more time. The wallpaper was a photo of Emma from last summer, gap-toothed smile, hair in pigtails, holding up a sandcastle she'd built at the beach. Sarah had taken the picture. It was one of the last good days before the diagnosis, before everything went to hell. I'm coming, baby, Daniel whispered to the photo. Daddy's coming home. The boarding announcement came. Daniel grabbed his carry-on and got in line. Outside, the sun was starting to rise over Denver, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink that Sarah would have loved. Daniel watched through the window as the ground crew loaded luggage into the plane's belly, thinking about all the invisible weight people carried with them when they traveled. The things that didn't fit in overhead compartments or get checked at the counter. He thought about Isabella showing up at his door looking tired and human, and nothing like the untouchable billionaire he'd spent 2 years being quietly terrified of. He thought about Emma asking when he'd be home, and for once, for the first time in so long, being able to give her an answer that wasn't a lie. The line moved forward. Daniel handed his boarding pass to the agent, walked down the jetway, found his seat near the back of the plane. Window seat. He'd specifically chosen window because if he was going to blow $800 on a last-minute flight, he at least wanted to watch the sunrise. The plane filled up slowly. A middle-aged woman took the middle seat, gave him a polite nod, and immediately put in earbuds. The aisle seat stayed empty. Small mercies. Daniel buckled his seatbelt and pulled out his phone one last time before airplane mode. A new text from Carol. At urgent care, they're running tests. She's asking for you. Tell her I'm on the plane. I'll be there in 4 hours. She'll be so happy. Daniel closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the seat. The engine's rumble started, low and steady, building toward takeoff. He should sleep. God knew he needed it. But every time he started to drift, his brain kicked back into overdrive, worrying about Emma, about the medical bills, about what Isabella had meant when she said they'd talk later, about whether this whole thing would somehow blow up in his face, despite her promises. The plane pushed back from the gate, taxied toward the runway. The flight attendant went through the safety demonstration that nobody ever really watched. And then they were moving, faster and faster, the ground falling away beneath them as Denver shrank to toy size below. Daniel watched the city disappear into clouds and thought about all the different ways a life could change in a single night. A knock on a hotel room door, a billionaire's unexpected kindness, a father's desperate race home. The plane leveled out at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The woman next to him had already fallen asleep, head tilted against the window. Daniel pulled out the piece of paper Isabella had given him, the one with her personal number scrawled in messy handwriting. He'd meant to throw it away, or at least tuck it into his wallet where it wouldn't get lost. Instead, he found himself staring at it, wondering what kind of person gave out their direct line to a mid-level employee they'd spoken to maybe 5 times in 2 years. What kind of person showed up at 2 a.m. to tell someone to go home? His phone buzzed in his pocket, one last notification before he'd switched to airplane mode. He pulled it out. Isabella again. Stop overthinking. Just go be a dad. Daniel blinked at the screen. How the hell did she know he was overthinking? Then again, she hadn't built a $9 billion company by being bad at reading people. He typed a quick response, even though it wouldn't send until they landed, trying. The flight attendant came by with a trash bag. Daniel handed over his empty coffee cup and settled back in his seat. Outside the window, the sky had turned fully bright now, the sun climbing over a landscape of clouds that looked like snowfields stretching to infinity. 4 hours to Hartford, another 30 minutes to drive to the urgent care center where Carol was waiting with Emma. 4.5 hours total, and then he'd be exactly where he needed to be. For once, he wasn't choosing between being a father and keeping his job. For once, someone had seen him struggling and actually helped instead of just telling him to try harder. Daniel didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if this was a one-time kindness or the beginning of something that would fundamentally change how he thought about work and survival and the impossible math of being a single parent. But right now, 30,000 feet above the ground, watching the sun paint the clouds gold, he decided it didn't matter. Emma was waiting, and he was going home. The plane touched down in Hartford at 10:47 a.m., 17 minutes ahead of schedule. Daniel had his seatbelt off before the wheels stopped rolling, already pulling his bag from the overhead compartment, while the flight attendants were still reminding everyone to remain seated. The woman next to him shot him an annoyed look. He didn't care. His phone came off airplane mode the second the captain gave the all clear. Notifications flooded in, 3 texts from Carol, 2 missed calls, a voicemail. Daniel's hands shook as he opened the messages. The first text. Doctor says it's strep throat. They're giving her antibiotics. The second, she's sleeping now. They have her on an IV for fluids. The third, sent 20 minutes ago. When does your plane land? Daniel typed back while shoving his way up the aisle. Just landed. On my way now. The response came before he'd made it to the jetway. Take your time. She's stable. Drive safe. Take your time. Carol had never told him to take his time in his life. She must be exhausted. Daniel broke into a jog through the terminal, weaving around families and business travelers who weren't in a desperate hurry to get anywhere. His carry-on banged against his leg. His chest felt tight, not from exertion, from the sheer animal need to get to his daughter. The urgent care was 32 minutes from the airport. Daniel made it in 24, running 2 red lights and pushing his ancient Honda to speeds it probably shouldn't hit. The whole time, his brain kept replaying that phone call from last night, Emma's small voice saying his name like it was the only word that mattered. He parked crooked in the lot and ran inside. Carol was in the waiting room, slumped in one of those terrible plastic chairs that seemed designed to make you as uncomfortable as possible. She looked up when he burst through the doors, and the relief on her face nearly broke him. She's in room 3, Carol said, already standing. They've got her on IV antibiotics. The fever broke about an hour ago. Daniel didn't wait for more. He pushed through the door to the treatment area, found room 3, and there she was. Emma. His whole world. Curled up on the examination table in a hospital gown that was way too big for her, an IV line taped to her small hand, eyes closed. Her hair was matted with sweat, her cheeks still flushed, but she was breathing steady and deep. Daniel crossed the room in 2 steps and pressed his hand to her forehead. Warm, but not burning like last night. The relief hit him so hard he had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. Daddy? Emma's eyes fluttered open. For a second she just stared at him, confused, like she couldn't quite believe he was real. Then her face crumpled and she reached for him. Daniel gathered her up, careful of the IV, careful of everything, and held her against his chest while she cried into his shoulder. She smelled like hospital soap and fever sweat and something else, something uniquely Emma that he'd know anywhere in the world. "You came home," she whispered. "Of course I came home." "But you said tomorrow." "I know what I said. I was wrong." He smoothed her hair back from her face. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner, baby. I'm so sorry." "It's okay." Emma pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed and glassy. "Grandma said you were on an airplane. A real one?" "Yeah, a real one." "Did you fly over the clouds?" "Right over them." That got him a small smile. Emma loved clouds, loved airplanes, loved anything that involved being up high where you could see the whole world spread out below you. Sarah used to say she'd grow up to be a pilot. Daniel had always figured she'd be whatever she wanted to be, as long as he could keep her safe and fed and loved enough to believe the world was worth exploring. The doctor came in then, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Dr. Patel. She gave Daniel a nod of recognition. "You must be Dad." "Yeah, how is she?" "Strep throat, pretty aggressive case. The IV fluids are helping, and the antibiotics should kick in within the next 12 to 24 hours. She'll need to finish the full course, 10 days. No school for at least 3 days, and keep her away from other kids until she's been on the meds for a full 48 hours. Daniel nodded, already doing the math in his head. 3 days minimum meant taking time off work. He'd just blown through whatever goodwill he might have earned by leaving the conference early, and 10 days of antibiotics meant at least 2 pharmacy trips, maybe 3 if they had to adjust the dosage. "Any questions?" Dr. Patel asked. "About 1,000, but none that she could answer." "No, thank you. You can take her home as soon as the IV bag is empty. Should be another 30 minutes or so. The nurse will go over the discharge instructions." She left. Emma snuggled back against Daniel's chest, already half asleep again. Carol appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of truly terrible waiting room coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing him one. Daniel took it gratefully. The coffee tasted like burned rubber, but it was hot and caffeinated, and that was enough. "Thank you," he said, "for everything. I know this isn't—" "Stop." Carol sat down in the chair next to the examination table. "You don't have to thank me. She's my granddaughter." "I know, but—" "Daniel." Carol's voice was firm. "I'm not doing you a favor. I'm taking care of family. That's what we do." Emma's breathing had evened out into sleep. Daniel adjusted his hold on her, trying not to jostle the IV line. His back was already starting to ache from the angle, but he'd stand here all day if that's what it took. "How did you get home so fast?" Carol asked. "I thought your flight wasn't until this afternoon." "It wasn't. I caught an earlier one." "Just like that? In the middle of the night?" Daniel hesitated. The whole story sounded insane. His boss showing up at his hotel room door at 2 in the morning, telling him to leave, giving him her personal cell number. Carol would think he'd made it up. Hell, Daniel wasn't entirely sure he hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. "Someone told me I should go," he said finally. "So I went." Carol studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Someone from work?" "Yeah." "Must be a pretty understanding boss." "She's complicated." That was putting it mildly. Daniel still didn't know what to make of Isabella Laurent. In 2 years, he'd built up this image of her. Ruthless, brilliant, completely untouchable. The kind of person who saw employees as numbers on a spreadsheet, useful until they weren't. And then she'd shown up at his door looking tired and human and told him to go be with his daughter. It didn't fit. None of it fit. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Daniel shifted Emma slightly and pulled it out one-handed. "Isabella, did you make it?" Daniel stared at the text for a beat too long. Carol noticed. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just work stuff." He typed back, "At urgent care. She's got strep. They've got her on antibiotics." The response was immediate. "Good. Take the rest of the week. I'll have HR sort out the leave paperwork." Daniel's stomach dropped. Leave paperwork meant unpaid time. Meant explaining absences to his manager, who already thought he was unreliable. Meant another text. "Paid leave, Daniel. Stop panicking. How the hell did she keep doing that?" He typed, "You can't just—" "I can. I did. Deal with it." Carol was watching him now with open curiosity. Daniel pocketed the phone before she could ask questions he didn't know how to answer. Your boss? She guessed. Yeah. At 11 in the morning on a Thursday? She's very hands-on. Carol's expression suggested she didn't quite believe him, but she let it drop. The nurse came in to check Emma's IV, declared that they'd be good to go in about 15 minutes, and left a stack of discharge papers on the counter. Daniel read through them while Emma slept against his chest. Standard instructions: rest, fluids, finish all medication even if symptoms improve, call if fever returns or symptoms worsen. The prescription was already sent to the pharmacy. They could pick it up on the way home. When the IV bag finally emptied, the nurse came back to remove the line. Emma woke up just long enough to whimper when the tape came off, then immediately fell back asleep. Daniel carried her to the car while Carol handled the checkout paperwork. The drive home was quiet. Emma dozed in her car seat. Carol followed behind them in her own car, and Daniel tried very hard not to think about the $800 flight or the credit card bill or what would happen when he went back to work next week. One crisis at a time. That's how he'd survived the last 18 months. One crisis, one decision, one impossible choice at a time. Home was a small 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood that used to be nice and was now just tired. The lawn needed mowing, the gutters needed cleaning. The front porch light had been burned out for 3 weeks. All the little maintenance tasks that Daniel kept meaning to handle and never quite got around to because there were only so many hours in a day and most of them went to work or Emma or trying to sleep. He carried Emma inside and put her in her bed, the one with the purple comforter and the stuffed animals lined up against the wall. She stirred when he tucked her in. Don't go, she mumbled. I'm not going anywhere, baby. I'm right here. Promise? Promise. She grabbed his hand and held on tight, already drifting back to sleep. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe, counting each rise and fall of her chest like proof that she was okay, that he'd gotten here in time, that nothing terrible had happened while he was 2,000 miles away, pretending to care about quarterly projections. Carol appeared in the doorway. I'm going to head out. Let her rest. Call me if you need anything. I will. Thank you. Stop thanking me. But she smiled when she said it. After Carol left, Daniel sat with Emma for another hour, just holding her hand and listening to the quiet sounds of the house. The refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the hallway, a neighbor's dog barking somewhere down the street. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The kind of sounds that used to bore him when Sarah was alive, and they were just living their regular life, never imagining how precious regular could be. His phone buzzed. Daniel pulled it out carefully, trying not to disturb Emma. Isabella. How is she? Daniel typed, sleeping. Fever's down, she'll be okay. Good. Get some rest. You look like hell. He blinked at the screen. You can't even see me. Don't need to. You flew all night, spent the morning in urgent care, and you're probably sitting next to her bed right now, running on 0 sleep and anxiety. Am I wrong? Daniel looked around Emma's room like Isabella might somehow be watching through the walls. That's unsettling. That's pattern recognition. Go to sleep, Daniel. Can't. Need to pick up her prescription. Do it later. Sleep first. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to explain that he couldn't just turn off his brain and trust that everything would be fine, that the last 18 months had taught him that the second you let your guard down, something terrible happened. But exhaustion was starting to win, pulling at him like gravity. Okay, he typed. Thank you. Again. Stop thanking me. Just take care of your kid. The conversation ended there. Daniel set his phone on Emma's nightstand and leaned back against the headboard, meaning to rest his eyes for just a minute. He woke up 4 hours later to Emma shaking his shoulder. Daddy, I'm hungry. Daniel sat up fast, disoriented. The light coming through Emma's window had shifted to late afternoon. His neck hurt from the angle he'd been sleeping at. Emma was sitting up in bed, looking tired but significantly more alert than she had that morning. What do you want to eat, baby? Soup? Soup I can do. Daniel hauled himself out of bed, every muscle in his body protesting. He felt like he'd been hit by a truck. When was the last time he'd actually slept? Tuesday night? Wednesday? Time had stopped making sense somewhere between the conference and the urgent care and Isabella Laurent's impossible kindness. He made Emma chicken noodle soup from a can, the kind with the cartoon characters on the label that she loved, and brought it to her in bed along with crackers and ginger ale. She ate slowly, carefully, like her throat still hurt, but she was too hungry to care. "Did you miss your big meeting?" she asked between spoonfuls. "Yeah, but it's okay." "Won't you get in trouble?" "Nope." "How come?" How to explain this to a 7-year-old? How to explain that his boss, a woman he'd been terrified of for 2 years, had shown up in the middle of the night and told him that his daughter mattered more than corporate presentations? That for once, someone with power had actually meant it when they said family came first? "My boss said it was okay," Daniel said finally. "She said being here with you was more important." Emma considered this while chewing a cracker. "Is your boss nice?" "I think maybe she is. I'm still figuring it out." "Mommy always said you should work for nice people." Daniel's throat tightened. "Yeah, she did say that." Emma finished about half the soup before pushing the bowl away. "I'm tired again." "Then sleep, baby. That's what you need to do right now. Just sleep and get better." She curled back up under the covers, and Daniel sat with her until her breathing evened out again. Then he took the dishes downstairs, washed them in the sink, and stood in his kitchen trying to remember what he was supposed to do next. The prescription. He still needed to pick up the prescription. Daniel grabbed his keys and wallet, checked on Emma one more time, still sleeping, and drove to the pharmacy. The pickup line was long, full of other exhausted-looking people clutching insurance cards and prescription numbers. He waited his turn, gave them Emma's information, and tried not to visibly wince when they told him the copay. $48. For 10 days of antibiotics, $48 he'd budgeted for groceries this week. He handed over his credit card and tried not to think about it. Back home, he put the medication in the bathroom cabinet and checked on Emma again. Still asleep. The house was too quiet. Daniel found himself wandering from room to room, too wired to rest despite the exhaustion dragging at him. He ended up in his home office, a converted bedroom that was mostly just a desk and a filing cabinet and stacks of papers he kept meaning to organize. His work laptop sat closed on the desk. He should probably check his email, should probably figure out what he'd missed while he was gone. But the thought of opening that laptop, of diving back into spreadsheets and project timelines and the constant low-grade panic that defined his work life, made him feel physically ill. His personal laptop was easier. Daniel opened it and pulled up his banking app instead, forcing himself to look at numbers he'd been avoiding for weeks. Checking account, $847.23. Savings account, $0. Credit card. 1. $8,234.19 out of $10,000 limit. Credit card 2. $4,891.45 out of $5,000 limit. Mortgage payment due in 6 days. $1,432. The math was simple and brutal. Even with his next paycheck, assuming it showed up on time, assuming there were no more surprise medical bills, assuming the universe stopped kicking him for 5 minutes, he'd be short. Again. Daniel closed the laptop before he could spiral further. The numbers would still be there tomorrow. They'd been there yesterday. They'd probably be there for the next 10 years unless something fundamental changed. He thought about Isabella telling him to take paid leave. Thought about the promotion he'd earned 18 months ago that was supposed to make everything easier and had instead just added more pressure, more travel, more time away from Emma. His phone buzzed. Daniel pulled it out, expecting Carol or maybe a reminder from the pharmacy about Emma's medication schedule. Isabella. "Stop looking at your bank account." Daniel actually laughed out loud. "Okay, that's just creepy now." He typed, "Are you psychic or something?" "No. I'm just familiar with the particular brand of anxiety that makes people obsessively check their finances at 5 in the afternoon when they should be resting. Speaking from experience?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, something like that. Daniel sat down at his desk, staring at his phone. He should probably stop texting his boss. Should probably maintain some semblance of professional boundaries. But Isabella kept initiating these conversations, kept checking in on him like she actually gave a damn, and Daniel was too tired and confused and weirdly grateful to shut it down. "Can I ask you something?" he typed. "You just did. Why are you doing this?" "I told you. Someone should have done it for me. That's not really an answer." The dots appeared and stayed there for almost a full minute. Daniel was starting to think she'd decided not to respond when his phone finally buzzed. When I was 26, Isabella wrote, I was working 100-hour weeks trying to get my first company off the ground. I hadn't slept in 3 days. My mother called and said my father had a stroke. I told her I'd come home as soon as I closed the deal I was working on. She said, okay. He died 6 hours later. I was still in the office. Daniel's chest went tight. He didn't know what to say to that. Wasn't sure there was anything to say. I made it to the funeral, Isabella continued. My mother told everyone I was doing important work, that Dad would have understood, and maybe he would have. But I didn't understand. Still don't. I built a company worth $9 billion, and I never got to ask my father if he was proud of me. Daniel stared at the words on his screen, trying to reconcile this vulnerable confession with the woman who'd stood in front of shareholders and announced layoffs without flinching, who'd built an empire on ruthless efficiency and calculated risk. I'm sorry, he typed. It felt inadequate. Don't be. I made my choices. But I'm not going to force my employees to make the same ones. Not anymore. Is that why you came to my room last night? Partially. Also because I heard your daughter crying on the phone, and I remembered what it felt like to be the person on the other end of that call, the one who doesn't come home. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to clear it. She's okay now, he wrote. Emma, she's sleeping. The antibiotics are working. Good. Keep me updated. You don't have to... Daniel, stop telling me what I have to do. I'm the CEO. I'll involve myself in whatever I want. That startled another laugh out of him. Yes, ma'am. Better. Now go eat something. You're running on coffee and adrenaline. She was right, of course. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. Breakfast on the plane, maybe? A granola bar in the airport? His stomach felt like a clenched fist. He went to the kitchen and made himself a sandwich, turkey and cheese, nothing fancy, and ate it standing at the counter while staring out the window at his overgrown lawn. The neighbor's sprinklers were on, creating little rainbows in the late afternoon sun. A couple of kids rode bikes down the street, laughing about something. Normal life. Happening all around him. People who weren't drowning in medical debt or terrified of losing their jobs or trying to figure out how to be both parents at once. Daniel wondered if he'd ever feel normal again. His phone buzzed one more time. Isabella, one more thing. When you come back to work, come see me first, before you talk to your manager or anyone else. We need to discuss some changes. Daniel's stomach dropped. There it was. The other shoe. The real reason she'd been so kind. She was about to fire him in person, wanted to deliver the bad news face to face. What kind of changes? He typed. The kind we'll discuss when you're back. Stop catastrophizing. I'm not. You are. I can hear it through the phone. Relax. You're not getting fired. Then what? Next week, Daniel. Rest now. The conversation ended there. Daniel put his phone down and pressed his palms against the counter, trying to slow his breathing. Changes could mean anything. Restructuring, reassignment, a demotion disguised as lateral movement. Or it could mean exactly what she said, just changes. Neither good nor bad, just different. He was too tired to figure it out tonight. Daniel checked on Emma one more time, still sleeping, fever still down, then went to his own bedroom and collapsed on top of the covers without even taking off his shoes. Sleep pulled him under almost immediately, deep and dreamless. The kind of sleep that only came after sustained crisis finally eased enough to let your body shut down. He woke up at 11 that night to Emma calling for him. Stumbled into her room, gave her medicine and water, sat with her until she fell back asleep. Then he went back to his own bed and stared at the ceiling, brain spinning through every possible scenario for what Isabella might want to discuss. Maybe she was moving him to a different department. Maybe she was cutting his hours. Maybe she'd decided that flexible work arrangements were actually code for "we're going to phase you out slowly." Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept him awake until 3 in the morning, maybe she actually meant what she'd said, about not forcing people to destroy themselves, about building something different. Daniel didn't know which possibility scared him more. The weekend passed in a blur of medication schedules and soup deliveries, and Emma slowly returning to herself. By Sunday afternoon, her fever was completely gone, and she was complaining about being bored, which Daniel took as a good sign. Bored meant healing. Bored meant normal. Carol came by with groceries, things Daniel hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Fresh fruit, bread, more soup, a rotisserie chicken that would feed them for days. She didn't mention the money. Neither did Daniel. They'd learned this dance over the past 18 months, the careful choreography of helping without acknowledging how much help was needed. "You look better," Carol said, unpacking bags onto the kitchen counter. "I slept," Daniel admitted. "Actually slept. First time in months. You should do it more often." "Yeah, well, we'll see how work handles me being gone all week." Carol paused, a box of crackers in her hand. "You really think they'd fire you for taking care of your sick daughter?" "I don't know anymore." Daniel leaned against the counter. 2 days ago, I would have said absolutely. Now I have no idea what to think." "Because of your boss?" "Yeah." "The one who texted you at the hospital?" Daniel had forgotten Carol had seen that. "She's been checking in, making sure Emma's okay." Carol's eyebrows went up. "That's unusual." "That's one word for it." "What's her name?" "Isabella Laurent." The crackers hit the counter with a thud. Carol stared at him. "Isabella Laurent? The Isabella Laurent? The billionaire?" "You know who she is?" "Daniel, everyone knows who she is. She was on the cover of Fortune last month. They called her the most ruthless CEO under 40. Carol was still staring. "That's your boss?" "Technically my boss's boss's boss. I'm pretty low on the chain." "And she personally texted you to check on Emma?" "Multiple times." Carol sat down at the kitchen table like her legs had stopped working. "I don't understand. Join the club." Daniel started putting groceries away, needing something to do with his hands. "She showed up at my hotel room at 2 in the morning and told me to come home. Gave me her personal cell number. Told me to take the week off, paid. And now she wants to meet with me when I get back to discuss changes." "What kind of changes?" "That's the million-dollar question." "Daniel," Carol's voice had gone careful, "are you sure this is appropriate?" He stopped mid-reach for the cupboard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, a billionaire CEO doesn't usually take a personal interest in random employees, especially not single male employees." It took Daniel a second to understand what she was implying. When he did, he actually laughed. "It's not like that." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen her exactly 5 times in 2 years. Because she looks at me the same way she looks at everyone else, like we're variables in an equation she's trying to solve. Because she's Isabella Laurent and I'm a guy who can barely make his mortgage payment. Rich people don't operate by normal rules. This isn't that, I promise." Daniel closed the cupboard, turned to face her. "I think something happened to her. Something that made her realize she's been pushing people too hard, and she's trying to fix it. That's all." Carol didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. They finished putting the groceries away in silence, and then she left with a reminder to call if he needed anything else. After she was gone, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and finally opened his work email. He'd been avoiding it for 3 days, but tomorrow was Monday, and he couldn't hide forever. 417 unread messages. Daniel's stomach clenched. He started sorting through them, deleting the automated notifications and company-wide announcements, flagging the ones that actually needed responses. Most were routine, project updates, meeting requests, questions from colleagues that had probably already been answered by someone else. But buried in the middle was an email from his direct manager, Patricia Chen, sent Friday afternoon. Subject: unauthorized absence from Denver conference. Daniel clicked it open, bracing himself. "Daniel, I need you to call me first thing Monday morning to explain why you left the conference 2 days early without prior approval. This kind of behavior is unacceptable and will be reflected in your Q4 performance review. We'll also need to discuss the cost of your early departure and whether that will be reimbursed or deducted from your next paycheck. Regards, Patricia." Daniel read it twice, feeling the familiar panic start to build in his chest. Unauthorized absence, performance review, deducted from paycheck, all the corporate language that meant you're in trouble and we're documenting it. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. "Did you open your work email yet?" Daniel stared at the message. "How do you know these things?" "Because it's Sunday night and you're the kind of person who checks email on Sunday night. Did Patricia send you something nasty? How did you—" "I'm CC'd on all management correspondence regarding employee absences. I saw it Friday. Ignore it. I can't just ignore it. She's my manager, and I'm her boss. Ignore it. I'll handle Patricia." Daniel typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "You can't keep intervening for me like this. Watch me." Isabella, tomorrow. My office. 9 a.m. We'll talk then. The conversation ended there, leaving Daniel staring at his laptop screen and the email from Patricia and wondering how his life had become so completely surreal in the span of 4 days. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Daddy, can we watch a movie?" Daniel closed his laptop. "Yeah, baby, we can watch a movie." They ended up on the couch together. Emma curled against his side while some animated film played on the TV. Daniel tried to pay attention, tried to be present, but his brain kept circling back to that meeting tomorrow. 9 a.m. Isabella's office. Changes to discuss. He must have dozed off sometime during the second act, because the next thing he knew, the credits were rolling and Emma was shaking his shoulder. "Movie's over," she said. "Sorry, baby, I missed the ending." "That's okay. We can watch it again sometime." Daniel carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, gave her the last dose of antibiotics for the day. She was almost back to normal now, still tired, but the worst was over. 3 more days at home to make sure she was fully recovered, and then back to school. 3 more days before Daniel had to face whatever was waiting for him at Laurent Industries. He set his alarm for 6:30 and tried to sleep, but his brain wouldn't shut off. Every time he started to drift, his mind served up a new scenario. Getting fired, getting demoted, getting transferred to some dead-end position where they could forget about him. Or worse, getting let go with some generous severance package that came with an NDA. Isabella's guilt money disguised as kindness. At 5:45, Daniel gave up on sleep entirely. He showered, shaved, put on his best suit, the charcoal one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and every job interview since. It still fit, barely. He'd lost weight over the past year, stress melting him down to sharper angles and hollow spaces. Carol arrived at 7 to watch Emma. Daniel kissed his daughter goodbye, promised he'd be home by dinner, and drove to Laurent Industries headquarters in downtown Hartford. The building was all glass and steel, 30 stories of corporate ambition reaching toward the sky. Daniel had been here maybe a dozen times in 2 years, mostly for company-wide meetings and mandatory training sessions. His actual office was in a satellite location 20 minutes away, a converted warehouse where the mid-level analysts worked in cramped cubicles and pretended the fluorescent lighting wasn't slowly killing them. He parked in the garage, took the elevator to the 30th floor, and gave his name to the receptionist. "Mr. Hayes," she said, professional smile in place. "Mrs. Laurent is expecting you. Conference room C." Not her office. A conference room. That felt significant somehow, though Daniel couldn't figure out if it was good significant or bad significant. Conference room C was at the end of a long hallway, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel had never been in this room before. It was pristine. Glass table, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than his house. Isabella was already there, standing by the windows with her back to the door. She was wearing what he'd come to think of as her uniform, tailored suit, hair pulled back, every inch the untouchable CEO. But when she turned around, something in her expression was different, softer maybe, or just tired. "You came," she said. "You told me to." Most people don't do what I tell them unless they're terrified. Who says I'm not terrified? That got Olmo's smile. "Sit down, Daniel." He sat. Isabella took the chair across from him, not at the head of the table like he'd expected. Equal footing, or at least the illusion of it. "How's Emma?" she asked. "Better. The antibiotics worked. She'll be back to school by Thursday." "Good." Isabella folded her hands on the table. "I read Patricia's email. I figured. She's wrong. About all of it. She's my manager. She has the authority I give her, which, as of this morning, no longer includes oversight of your performance reviews." Daniel's brain stuttered to a halt. "What?" "You're being reassigned, effective immediately. You'll report directly to Marcus Webb in the Strategic Planning Division. He's better equipped to manage someone with your skill set." "I don't understand. I'm an analyst. Strategic planning is 3 levels up from where you are now. I know." Isabella's expression didn't change. "Marcus needs someone who can see patterns, catch errors before they become disasters. You've already proven you can do that with the Sanderson account. This is a better fit." Daniel's mouth had gone dry. "This is a promotion. It's a reassignment with a corresponding salary adjustment. 15% increase backdated to the start of this quarter. 15%. Daniel did the math automatically. That was almost $12,000 a year, enough to actually save money, enough to stop drowning. Why? He managed. Because you're good at your job and you've been wasted in Patricia's department for too long. That's not what I mean. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? Isabella was quiet for a moment, studying him across the table. Do you know what I was doing when I was your age? Running your first company, living in a studio apartment in Boston with 2 roommates and $60,000 in student debt, working 18-hour days, eating ramen for every meal because I couldn't afford anything else. She leaned back in her chair. I had this theory that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved myself enough, everything would work out. And it did, eventually. I built something, made money, got successful. That sounds like a good thing. It was, until I realized I'd spent 15 years optimizing for the wrong metrics. Isabella's voice had gone quiet. I measured success by revenue and market share and how many competitors I could crush. And I taught everyone who worked for me to measure success the same way. Work harder, want it more, sacrifice everything else. That's how business works. It's how I thought business worked. She met his eyes. Then I heard you on the phone with your daughter, and I realized I'd built a company that forces people to choose between their jobs and their families. And that's not success. That's just cruelty with a profit margin. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The Isabella Laurent he'd imagined, ruthless, untouchable, purely focused on the bottom line, wouldn't have cared about that phone call, wouldn't have shown up at his hotel room, wouldn't be sitting here now offering him a promotion and looking almost guilty about it. I can't change what happened to my father, Isabella continued. Can't go back and make different choices. But I can change how this company operates going forward. And that starts with making sure people like you don't have to destroy themselves to stay employed. People like me? Good people. Competent people. People who are trying their best in impossible situations and shouldn't have to prove their worth by sacrificing their kids. Daniel's throat had gone tight again. He swallowed hard. The reassignment to strategic planning. Is that real, or are you just moving me somewhere you can keep an eye on me? It's real. Marcus requested you specifically after I told him about the Sanderson catch. He's been trying to poach you for 6 months, but Patricia kept blocking the transfer. Why would she do that? Because you made her department look good and she didn't want to lose that. But Patricia's been managing for metrics instead of people, and that's going to change. For everyone, not just you. Isabella slid a folder across the table. Daniel opened it. Inside was a formal offer letter, new position, new salary, new reporting structure. Everything she'd said, in writing. There's something else, Isabella said. The new position comes with flexible work arrangements. You can work from home 3 days a week. The other 2 days, you come in for face-to-face meetings with Marcus and the strategic team. But if Emma gets sick again, or if there's a school event, or if you just need to be present, you work from home. No questions asked. Daniel stared at the paperwork. This was too much, too good. There had to be a catch. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to do your job. That's all. Nobody offers this kind of flexibility without expecting something in return. You're right, I do expect something. Isabella's expression had gone serious. I expect you to be honest with me. If the workload is too much, tell me. If you need more support, tell me. If someone in this company is making it impossible for you to do your job and be a parent, tell me before you break. Why would you care if I break? Because I've seen what happens when good people break, Daniel. They quit. They burn out. They make mistakes. They leave and take their institutional knowledge with them, and the company gets worse for it. She paused. And because I'm tired of running a place where people have to choose between keeping their jobs and being human. Daniel looked down at the offer letter again. The numbers didn't make sense. The flexibility didn't make sense. None of this made sense in the context of the corporate world he'd been navigating for the past decade. What if this doesn't work, he asked. What if I take this position and I screw it up? Then we'll figure it out, same as we would with any employee. But I'm not any employee. You personally intervened for me. I did. And I'll do it for anyone else in this company who needs it. That's the point. Isabella stood up. This isn't about you being special, Daniel. It's about the company being better. You're just the first person I'm trying this with. Daniel stood too, still holding the folder. When do I start? Marcus wants you on his team by next Monday. That gives you the rest of this week to get Emma settled and tie up loose ends with Patricia's department. She's going to hate this. Patricia's going to have bigger problems than losing you. She's got about 30 other employees I'm going to be talking to this month about similar reassignments. Isabella walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. This stays between us for now. I don't want it getting out that I'm playing favorites. You are playing favorites. I'm correcting an inefficiency. There's a difference. Daniel almost smiled. If you say so. Isabella opened the door, held it for him. Go home, Daniel. Spend the week with your daughter. Start fresh on Monday. He walked past her into the hallway, still clutching the folder like it might disappear if he let go. The elevator ride down felt surreal. The walk to his car felt surreal. Sitting in the parking garage with the offer letter on his lap, reading it over and over to make sure the numbers were real, that felt most surreal of all. 15% raise. Flexible schedule. A position 3 levels higher than where he'd been yesterday. Daniel pulled out his phone and called Carol. Everything okay? She answered immediately, worry in her voice. Yeah, everything's... He stopped. How did you explain this? I got promoted. Silence on the other end, then... What? Strategic Planning Division. 15% raise. I can work from home 3 days a week. Daniel, that's... How did this happen? Isabella Laurent happened. More silence. Your boss really is something else. Yeah. Daniel leaned his head back against the seat. Yeah, she really is. He stayed on the phone with Carol for another few minutes, letting her excitement wash over him, trying to believe this was actually real. When he hung up, he sat in the parking garage for a long time, just breathing. Then he drove home to tell Emma he'd be around more, that he wouldn't have to choose anymore between being her father and keeping them fed, that maybe, just maybe, things were actually going to be okay. Emma was in the living room when he got home, coloring at the coffee table. She looked up when he walked in. You're back early, she said. Meeting didn't take as long as I thought. Did you get in trouble? Daniel sat down next to her on the floor. No, baby, I didn't get in trouble. Actually, I got some good news. What kind of good news? The kind where Daddy gets to stay home more, work from here instead of the office. Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? She threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him over. That's the best news ever! Daniel held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo and crayons and home. Yeah, Em, it really is. Carol made herself scarce, heading into the kitchen to give them space. Daniel stayed on the floor with Emma, watching her color a picture of what appeared to be a dragon fighting a robot. The composition was chaotic, and the colors made no sense, but she was completely absorbed in it, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. This was what mattered. Not quarterly reports or performance reviews or climbing some corporate ladder, just this. Being here, being present, watching his daughter create something strange and wonderful because she could. His phone buzzed. Daniel pulled it out. Isabella. Did you sign the offer letter? Daniel looked at the folder sitting on the couch where he'd dropped it. He hadn't signed anything yet, hadn't made it official. Not yet, he typed back. Why not? Still trying to figure out if this is real? It's real. Sign the damn paper, Daniel. He almost laughed. Even when she was being kind, Isabella Laurent still gave orders like a general commanding troops. Daniel retrieved the folder, found a pen, and signed his name on the dotted line. Then he took a photo of the signature page and texted it to Isabella. Done, he wrote. Good. See you Monday. Don't screw this up. No pressure or anything. You can handle pressure. That's why Marcus wants you. The conversation ended there. Daniel put his phone away and watched Emma color. She'd moved on to adding what looked like lasers coming out of the robot's eyes, carefully staying inside the lines she'd drawn. Daddy? She said without looking up. Yeah, baby? I'm glad you're home. Daniel's vision blurred. He blinked hard. Me too, Em. Me too. The rest of the week passed in a strange, gentle rhythm. Daniel took Emma to her follow-up appointment on Wednesday. Strep completely cleared. Doctor said she could go back to school Thursday. He cleaned the house, did laundry, cooked actual meals instead of living on takeout and granola bars. He even tackled some of the yard work he'd been putting off for months. And in the quiet moments, when Emma was occupied with coloring or watching TV or playing in her room, Daniel tried to wrap his head around what had happened. How one phone call, one moment of vulnerability overheard by the right person, had somehow changed everything. He thought about Isabella's father, wondered what kind of man he'd been, wondered if he'd known his daughter was sacrificing everything to build her empire, wondered if he would have wanted her to. Thursday morning, Daniel helped Emma get ready for school. She was excited to see her friends again, already talking about everything she'd tell them. Daniel packed her lunch, walked her to the bus stop, watched her climb aboard with her backpack bouncing. The house was too quiet after she left. Daniel made coffee, opened his laptop, and started reviewing the materials Marcus had sent over about the strategic planning division, project portfolios, team structures, ongoing initiatives. It was complex work, the kind that would stretch him, but in a good way. In a way that felt like growth instead of drowning. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus Webb. Looking forward to having you on the team Monday. Let's grab coffee around 9 to talk through the transition." Daniel saved the number, typed back, "Sounds good. Thank you for the opportunity." "Thank Isabella. She's the one who made this happen." "I did." "And?" "And she told me to stop thanking her." "Yeah, that sounds like Isabella." "See you Monday, Daniel." Daniel put his phone down and stared out the kitchen window at the neighborhood he'd lived in for 6 years. Same houses, same trees, same cracked sidewalk that the city kept promising to fix and never did. Everything looked exactly the same as it had a week ago. But everything was different. Friday, Daniel went into Patricia's office to formally submit his resignation from her department. She took it about as well as he'd expected. Tight smile, clipped congratulations, thinly veiled resentment in every word. "Strategic planning is a big step up," she said, not quite looking at him. "I'm sure you'll do well." "Thank you. I'll need you to document all your current projects before you transition. Make sure nothing falls through the cracks." "Of course." Patricia shuffled papers on her desk, avoiding eye contact. "Can I ask how this happened? Marcus doesn't usually pull people from my department." Daniel chose his words carefully. "He saw my work on the Sanderson account, asked if I'd be interested in a transfer." "And you didn't think to mention this to me?" "It happened pretty fast." "I see." Patricia's smile had gone brittle. "Well, good luck with your new position." Daniel recognized a dismissal when he heard one. He left her office and spent the rest of the day writing transition documents that nobody would probably read, tying up loose ends that didn't really matter anymore. At 4:30, he packed up his desk. 2 years of accumulated junk, coffee mugs, notepads, a photo of Emma from last year's school picture day. It all fit in one small box. He was halfway to the elevator when someone called his name. "Daniel, wait up!" Marcus Webb was striding down the hallway, tall and energetic in a way that made Daniel feel exhausted just looking at him. They'd met twice before, once at a company mixer, once in passing at a conference. Marcus had seemed nice enough, smart, the kind of manager who actually listened when you talked. "Leaving already?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, figured I'd beat the traffic." "Smart. Hey, listen, I know we're meeting Monday, but I wanted to catch you before the weekend. Make sure you know this transfer wasn't just Isabella pulling strings." Daniel adjusted the box in his arms. "I wasn't sure what to think, honestly. I've been trying to get you on my team since last summer. That Sanderson catch was brilliant. You saw a pattern that 3 different analysts missed. That's the kind of thinking we need in strategic planning." Patricia said no. Patricia said you were too valuable to her department, which, fair enough. But then Isabella overrode her, and here we are. Marcus grinned. "Not complaining, by the way. I'm just glad it finally worked out." "So am I." "Good. Because I'm going to work you hard, Daniel. This isn't a favor. It's a job, and I expect results." Somehow, that was more reassuring than any amount of gentle reassurance would have been. Marcus wasn't treating him like a charity case, just like an employee who'd earned his spot. "Understood," Daniel said. "Excellent. See you Monday. 9 a.m. Coffee's on me." Marcus headed back down the hallway, already pulling out his phone to deal with whatever crisis was next. Daniel watched him go, then continued to the elevator. Outside, the late afternoon sun was turning everything golden. Daniel put his box in the trunk and sat in the driver's seat for a minute, just breathing. 1 week ago, he'd been in a hotel room in Denver, terrified he was going to lose everything. Now he was driving home to his daughter with a promotion and a raise and something that felt almost like hope. His phone buzzed. Isabella. How did it go with Patricia? About how you'd expect. She wasn't happy. She'll get over it. Marcus? Better. He said he's been trying to get me on his team for months. He has been. I just finally gave him permission. Daniel started the car. Thank you. Again. I know you said to stop, but then stop. This is business, Daniel. You're good at what you do. I put you where you can do it better. That's all. That's not all, and you know it. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. Fine. You're welcome. Now go home and have a good weekend. Yes, ma'am. And stop calling me ma'am. It makes me feel ancient. What should I call you? Isabella works fine. Daniel pulled out of the parking lot, phone still in his hand at a red light. He typed, Okay, have a good weekend, Isabella. You too. The light turned green. Daniel pocketed his phone and drove home through the golden afternoon, past the coffee shop where he and Sarah used to get breakfast on Saturdays, past the park where Emma learned to ride her bike, past all the familiar landmarks of a life he'd been barely managing to hold together. Emma's bus dropped her off at 5:15. Daniel was waiting at the stop, and her face lit up when she saw him. You're home, she said, running over. I'm home. Can we make cookies? Daniel pretended to think about it. I don't know. Do we have everything we need? We can check. They walked home hand in hand, Emma chattering about her day at school, who said what at recess, what they learned in math, how the teacher gave her a sticker for being brave about being sick. Normal 7-year-old things. Beautiful, mundane, exactly what Daniel needed. They did have everything for cookies. They made a mess of the kitchen, got flour everywhere, and ended up with 2 dozen chocolate chip cookies that were slightly burned on the bottom and absolutely perfect. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a glass of wine he'd found in the back of the cupboard and his laptop open to his banking app. The numbers were still bad, still overwhelming, but they didn't feel quite as suffocating as they had a week ago. 15% raise, backdated to the start of the quarter. That meant a bigger paycheck hitting his account in a week and a half. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to stop the bleeding. Enough to actually make the mortgage payment on time. Enough to not panic every time Emma needed new shoes or the car made a weird noise. Daniel finished the wine and closed the laptop. Then he pulled out his phone and looked at the text thread with Isabella. The whole conversation history, from that first message in the Denver airport to this afternoon's exchange about Patricia. A week ago, she'd been the terrifying billionaire CEO who barely knew his name. Now she was the person who'd changed his life. Daniel didn't understand it, wasn't sure he ever would. But for the first time in 18 months, he felt like maybe he could stop just surviving and actually start living again. And that was enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy Daniel hadn't felt since his first day at Laurent Industries 2 years ago. He dropped Emma at school, watched her disappear into the building with her friends, and drove to headquarters with his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. Marcus's office was on the 22nd floor, in a section of the building Daniel had never been to before. Everything up here looked expensive. Actual art on the walls instead of motivational posters, real plants instead of plastic ones, carpet that didn't smell like industrial cleaner and desperation. Marcus was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that seemed genuine. Daniel, come in, sit down. How was your week? Good. Emma's completely recovered. Glad to hear it. Marcus handed him one of the coffees. Isabella mentioned you'd had a rough go of it, family emergency and all that. Daniel took the coffee, wondering how much Isabella had told him. Yeah, it was touch and go for a bit. Well, you're here now. That's what matters. Marcus pulled up a presentation on his monitor. Let me walk you through what we're working on. I want you to get a sense of the big picture before we dive into specifics. The next 2 hours were a crash course in strategic planning, market analysis, competitive positioning, long-term growth initiatives. It was dense, complex work that required thinking 3 moves ahead, seeing patterns across multiple data sets, anticipating problems before they materialized. Daniel loved it. It was exactly the kind of challenge he'd been hungry for, the kind of work that made his brain light up instead of just grinding through spreadsheets on autopilot. Marcus talked fast, expected Daniel to keep up, didn't waste time on hand-holding or excessive explanations. Questions? Marcus asked when they'd finished going through the current portfolio. About 100, but I can probably figure most of them out on my own. Good answer. I don't have time to spoon-feed anyone. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Here's how I operate. I give you a problem, you come back with solutions. If you get stuck, ask. If you see something I missed, speak up. If you need resources, make a case for them. I trust my team to be adults. Don't make me regret it. Understood. Excellent. Your first project is the Meridian account. They're a pharmaceutical client, big contract, lots of moving parts. We've been doing quarterly projections for them, but something's off with the numbers. I need you to dig in and figure out what we're missing. Marcus slid a thick folder across the desk. Daniel flipped it open. Spreadsheets, reports, analysis from 3 different analysts. At first glance, everything looked fine, which meant the problem was buried somewhere in the assumptions. When do you need this? End of week. Present your findings Friday morning, team meeting. 5 days to dig through months of work and find an error that 3 other analysts had missed. Daniel felt that familiar flutter of anxiety in his chest, the one that said he was in over his head, that he'd screw this up, that he didn't deserve to be here. Then he thought about Emma asking when he'd be home, and Isabella showing up at his door at 2 a.m, and the decision he'd made to actually try instead of just surviving. I'll have it ready, Daniel said. Marcus grinned. I knew I was right about you. Go on, get started. You're hot desking for now, but we'll get you set up properly by next week. Daniel took the folder and left. Feeling like he'd just been thrown into the deep end of a pool he wasn't entirely sure he could swim in. But at least someone thought he could. The rest of Monday disappeared into numbers and analysis. Daniel found an empty desk in a corner of the strategic planning floor and spread out his materials, pulling up data sets and cross-referencing projections until his eyes started to blur. By 5 o'clock, he'd barely scratched the surface, but he could already see the edges of something wrong in the Meridian account, a pattern that didn't quite line up. His phone buzzed. Emma, calling from Carol's house. Hey baby, everything okay? When are you coming home? Daniel looked at his watch. 5:15. He'd told Carol he'd pick Emma up by 6. Soon, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. Can we have spaghetti for dinner? Yeah, we can have spaghetti. Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you too, Em. He hung up and started packing his things. One of the other analysts, a woman named Jennifer who'd introduced herself earlier, glanced over from her desk. Leaving already? She asked, not unkindly. Have to pick up my daughter. Oh, you've got kids? How old? 7, Jennifer smiled. I've got twin boys, 9 years old. It's chaos. Yeah, I bet. Marcus is good about the family stuff, Jennifer continued. I work from home Wednesdays and Fridays. He doesn't care as long as the work gets done. That eased something in Daniel's chest. Good to know. Also, if you need help with the Meridian account, let me know. I worked on their Q2 projections. Might be able to point you in the right direction. I appreciate that. Daniel finished packing up and headed out, thinking about how different this floor felt from Patricia's department. People actually talked to each other here, helped each other, didn't seem to be constantly competing for scraps of recognition. The drive to Carol's took 20 minutes in traffic. Emma ran out to the car before Daniel even made it to the front door, backpack bouncing. Daddy! Hey, baby! Good day at school? We learned about fractions, and I got picked to be line leader. Daniel helped her into the car seat she was rapidly getting too big for. Line leader, huh? That's a big deal. I know! Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. And tomorrow is library day, and I get to check out 2 books instead of 1 because Mrs. Martinez said I'm a good reader. Carol appeared on the porch, waving. Daniel waved back, mouthing, thank you. She nodded and went back inside. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home. Daniel needed spaghetti ingredients and a dozen other things he'd been putting off buying. Emma helped pick out pasta shapes, insisted on the kind with wheels because they were more fun, and convinced him to get ice cream for dessert. At checkout, Daniel's card went through without declining. The relief was almost embarrassing. Home. Cooking dinner while Emma set the table and told him about every detail of her day. Eating together at the kitchen table instead of Daniel scarfing down takeout at his desk while Emma watched TV in the other room. Doing dishes together, Emma standing on a stool to reach the sink, more water ending up on the floor than in the basin. Bath time. Pajamas. 2 books instead of 1 because she'd had such a good day. Tucking her in, kissing her forehead, turning on her nightlight shaped like a star. Daddy? Yeah, baby? I like it when you're home more. Daniel's throat went tight. Me too, Em. Is it going to be like this now? With your new job? Yeah, 3 days a week I'll work from here. The other 2 days, Grandma will pick you up from school like today. Emma thought about this, hugging her stuffed rabbit. That's way better than before. Yeah, it really is. After Emma fell asleep, Daniel went back downstairs and opened his laptop. He should probably rest, but his brain was still churning through the Meridian account, trying to pin down that pattern he'd noticed. He pulled up the spreadsheets again, cross-referenced them with the client's public financial statements, and there it was. The revenue projections were based on a drug approval timeline that didn't match the FDA's actual review schedule. Someone had made an assumption, probably reasonable at the time, that hadn't been updated when the timeline shifted. It was a small error, but compounded over quarterly projections, it would throw everything off by millions. Daniel spent the next 2 hours documenting the discrepancy, building a presentation that showed the error and proposed corrections. By the time he finished, it was almost midnight, and his eyes felt like sandpaper, but he had something solid to show Marcus. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Still awake? Daniel blinked at the screen. How do you know I'm awake? Lucky guess. How was day 1 with Marcus? Good. He gave me the Meridian account. Already? He doesn't waste time. Found the error, I think. Revenue projections are based on outdated FDA timeline. Nice catch. When are you presenting? Friday morning. Good luck. You'll do fine. Daniel hesitated, then typed, Can I ask you something? You just did. Why did you really do this? The promotion, the flexibility, all of it? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Daniel was starting to think she wouldn't answer when his phone finally buzzed. Because I'm trying to build something different, Isabella wrote, and I needed to start somewhere. You were the somewhere. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. I wouldn't have picked you otherwise. What if I screw up? Then you screw up. Everyone does eventually. The question is whether you learn from it. Daniel stared at that response for a long moment. Is that what you did? After your father? Another long pause. I'm still learning. That's why I'm doing this. Better late than never. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is pretty incredible. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. That made Daniel smile. Your secret's safe with me. Good. Now go to sleep. You look terrible. You can't see me. Don't need to. Daniel shook his head, still smiling. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Daniel. He closed his laptop and headed upstairs, checking on Emma one more time before collapsing into his own bed. Sleep came easier than it had in months. The rest of the week fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Tuesday and Wednesday, Daniel worked from home. Video calls with Marcus and the team in the morning, heads down analysis work in the afternoon, picking Emma up from school at 3 and actually being present for homework and dinner and bedtime. Thursday, he was back in the office, refining his Meridian presentation and getting feedback from Jennifer, who confirmed his findings and suggested a few additional angles to explore. Friday morning arrived with that particular brand of nervous energy that came before important presentations. Daniel got to the office early, ran through his slides one more time, and tried not to think about the fact that he'd only been in this position for 5 days and was about to present to a room full of people who'd been doing strategic planning for years. The conference room filled up at 8:45. Marcus, Jennifer, 3 other analysts Daniel had only briefly met, and sitting in the back corner like she just happened to be there, Isabella. Daniel's brain stuttered. Ms. Laurent, I didn't realize you'd be joining us. Marcus invited me. I like to sit in on Meridian meetings when I can. Her expression was perfectly neutral. Don't let me throw you off. Right. Like that was possible. Marcus clapped his hands together. All right, let's get started. Daniel, you're up. Show us what you found. Daniel pulled up his presentation, took a breath, and launched into it. He walked them through the error, how the FDA timeline assumption had shifted, how that cascaded through the projections, how much it would impact the client's planning if they didn't correct it now. He showed the corrected numbers, the revised projections, 3 different scenarios based on different approval timelines. Halfway through, he forgot to be nervous. The work was solid. The numbers told a clear story. And when he looked around the room, people were actually paying attention, nodding, taking notes, asking smart questions that showed they understood what he was saying. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Marcus started clapping, and the rest of the room joined in. "Excellent work," Marcus said. "Seriously, we've been looking at these numbers for months and nobody caught that." Jennifer leaned forward. "How much does this change our quarterly projections to the client?" "About 8 million over the next fiscal year," Daniel said. "Could be more if the FDA delays approval further." "We need to get this to Meridian immediately," Marcus decided. "Jennifer, can you work with Daniel to put together a client briefing? I want this on their desk by Monday." "Absolutely." Marcus turned to Isabella. "Thoughts?" She'd been quiet through the whole presentation, just watching. Now she met Daniel's eyes across the room. "I think you hired the right person." That simple statement shouldn't have meant as much as it did. But coming from Isabella Laurent in front of his new team, it felt like something shifted into place, like maybe he actually belonged here. The meeting wrapped up with action items and next steps. People filed out, chatting about the Meridian account and weekend plans. Isabella lingered, waiting until the room cleared. "Walk with me," she said. It wasn't a request. Daniel followed her out of the conference room, down the hallway, into an elevator that took them all the way to the 30th floor. Isabella's actual office was at the end of another hallway, behind a door that probably cost more than Daniel's car. She held the door open. "Come in for a minute." The office was surprisingly sparse: desk, chairs, windows overlooking the city. No personal photos, no decorations, nothing that revealed anything about the person who worked here. It looked like a hotel room, temporary. "That was good work today," Isabella said, closing the door behind them. "Thank you." Marcus was right to push you. You're capable of more than Patricia was letting you do. Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets. "I was terrified I'd screw it up." "You were supposed to be. Fear keeps you sharp." Isabella leaned against her desk. "How's the rest of it working? The schedule? The flexibility?" "It's good. Really good. I picked Emma up from school Tuesday, and we actually had time to go to the park. That hasn't happened in months." "Good. Can I ask you something?" "That's becoming a habit. You said I was the somewhere you started. Are you really going to do this for other people?" Isabella was quiet for a moment, looking out the windows at Hartford sprawled below them. "I've been thinking about that all week, about what it would take to actually change how this company operates." And it's complicated. I can't just wave my hand and make everyone's life better. Some roles genuinely require in-office presence. Some projects need tight deadlines and long hours. But I've been going through personnel files, looking at who's struggling and why. There are too many people like you, competent, dedicated, burning out because they're trying to do two impossible jobs at once. So what are you going to do? Start making changes, different changes for different people depending on what they need. Flexible schedules for some, better childcare benefits for others, mental health support, actually enforcing vacation policies instead of just pretending we have them. Isabella turned back to face him. "It's going to take time, and some people are going to push back hard, but I think it's worth doing." "Why now?" "You've been CEO for what, 7 years? 8. And because I'm tired of building something that destroys people, even if it's profitable." She crossed her arms. "My father worked himself to death trying to provide for our family. Literal death. Heart attack at 59. And I swore I'd never end up like him. But then I built a company that encourages everyone else to do exactly that. The irony isn't lost on me." Daniel thought about that, about the different ways people tried to outrun their parents' mistakes and ended up making new versions of the same ones. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." "We'll see. Ask me again in 6 months when half my management team has quit because I'm making them actually care about their employees." "You really think that'll happen?" "I know it will. Already got 2 resignation letters this week from managers who don't like the new direction." Isabella's expression was hard to read. "But I'd rather lose people who can't adapt than keep destroying the ones who can." There was a knock at the door. Isabella's assistant poked her head in. "Ms. Laurent, your 10 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Miranda. I'll be right there." Isabella looked at Daniel. "Get out of here. Go enjoy your weekend. You earned it." Daniel headed for the door, then paused. "Isabella?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for all of it. I know you said to stop thanking you, but then stop. But she was almost smiling. Go be with your daughter, Daniel. That's all the thanks I need. Daniel left, taking the elevator back down to 22 to grab his things. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Carol had picked her up early from school for a dentist appointment. They'd be back by 3, which meant Daniel had actual free time. An entire afternoon with nothing scheduled, no crisis to manage, no impossible choice to make between work and family. He drove home through the Friday afternoon traffic, thinking about Isabella's father and what it meant to build something worth having. Not just money or success, but something that didn't require sacrificing everything else to achieve it. Home was quiet. Daniel made himself lunch, an actual lunch, sitting at the table instead of eating over the sink, and then did something he hadn't done in months. He pulled out his guitar from the back of the closet. It was dusty, strings probably out of tune. Daniel hadn't played since before Sarah got sick. Music had felt too hard, too emotional, too much like the person he used to be before grief reshaped him into someone else. But now, sitting in his living room with his guitar in his lap, Daniel tuned the strings and started playing. Badly at first, fingers remembering the chords slowly, but then muscle memory kicked in and the music came easier. He played for almost an hour, old songs he used to know by heart, melodies that Sarah had loved, simple progressions that felt like coming home. And when Emma burst through the door at 3:15, she stopped dead in the doorway. "Daddy, you're playing guitar." "Yeah, baby. Thought I'd pick it back up." "I didn't know you could play guitar." That hit him harder than it should have. Emma had been 5.5 when Sarah died. She didn't remember a lot of things from before. Didn't remember Daniel playing music at the kitchen table, or Sarah singing along off-key, or the way their house used to be full of sound instead of just quiet grief. "Come here," Daniel said. "I'll teach you a chord." Emma climbed onto the couch next to him, and Daniel showed her how to hold the guitar, where to put her fingers for a simple C chord. She pressed down too hard, then not hard enough, but eventually she got it, one clear note ringing out. "I did it," she said, delighted. "You did. Want to learn another one?" They spent the next half hour working on basic chords, Emma's small fingers struggling with the strings, but determined to figure it out. And Daniel realized this was what he'd been fighting for all along. Not just survival, not just keeping them fed and housed, but moments like this. Teaching his daughter something he loved. Being present enough to actually show her who he was instead of just who he'd become. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat on the back porch with a beer and his phone. He thought about texting Isabella, then decided against it. She'd told him to stop thanking her. What else was there to say? But his phone buzzed before he could put it away. "Isabella, how was your afternoon?" Daniel smiled. "Good. Taught Emma some guitar chords. Didn't know you played. Haven't in a while. Felt good to pick it back up. What made you start again?" Daniel thought about how to answer that. "I think I finally had enough breathing room to remember who I used to be, before everything fell apart." "And? Who were you?" "Someone who made music and didn't spend every night terrified about money. Someone who had time to be a person instead of just a parent and an employee." "You're still that person, Daniel. You just forgot for a while." He stared at that text for a long time. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm someone different now, haven't figured it out yet." "You will. Give it time." Is that what you're doing? Trying to figure out who you are when you're not just the ruthless CEO? The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Something like that. Turns out it's harder than I expected. Let me know when you figure it out. I'll compare notes. Deal. The conversation ended there. Daniel finished his beer and went inside, checking on Emma one more time before heading to bed. She was sprawled sideways across her mattress, stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm, completely at peace. Daniel stood in her doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe, thinking about all the different versions of himself he'd been over the past 2 years. The husband who'd lost his wife, the father trying not to drown, the employee terrified of making one wrong move. And now this new version he was still figuring out. Someone with breathing room, someone with options, someone who could maybe start building instead of just surviving. He didn't know who that person was yet, but for the first time since Sarah died, he thought maybe it was okay not to know. Maybe figuring it out was the point. Daniel turned off Emma's light and went to bed, and for once, sleep came easy. 3 months later, Daniel sat in a coffee shop near headquarters, waiting for Marcus to arrive for their quarterly review. The place was crowded with the usual Friday morning rush. People grabbing caffeine before work, students hunched over laptops, a couple arguing quietly in the corner about whose turn it was to pick up their kid from daycare. Daniel checked his phone. Emma had texted him a photo of her breakfast, pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse that Carol had made. He sent back a thumbs up and a heart, then pocketed the phone as Marcus walked in. "Sorry I'm late," Marcus said, dropping into the chair across from him. Isabella called an emergency meeting about the Hoffman acquisition. Total chaos. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, she's just being thorough. You know how she gets." Marcus signaled the barista for coffee. "So, 3 months in strategic planning. How's it treating you?" "Good. Really good, actually." "That's what I like to hear. Your work on the Meridian account saved our relationship with them. They referred 2 new clients based on that catch alone." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "I didn't know that." "Well, now you do. You're doing exactly what I hired you for, seeing things other people miss. Keep it up." Marcus's coffee arrived. He took a sip and grimaced. "Terrible. Anyway, I wanted to talk about your trajectory here. Where do you see yourself in a year?" The question caught Daniel off guard. A year ago, he'd been hoping just to survive until the next paycheck. Now someone was asking him to think about growth, about trajectory, about a future that extended beyond immediate crisis management. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "I'm still getting my feet under me." "Fair enough. But start thinking about it. I see potential here for a team lead position eventually, maybe 18 months out if you keep performing at this level. Team lead. That meant more responsibility, more money, more pressure. A year ago, Daniel would have jumped at it without thinking. Now he found himself hesitating. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "Sure. How do you balance it? The job, the family stuff? Jennifer mentioned you've got kids too." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Badly, most of the time. My wife handles the majority of it, which isn't fair to her. But we've gotten better at setting boundaries. I don't check email after 8 p.m. unless something's actually on fire. I work from home Mondays so I can do school drop-off. Small things, but they add up." "Does Isabella really not care about that stuff?" "She cares about results. How you get there is your business." Marcus paused. "Although she's been different lately. Have you noticed?" "Different how?" "More involved in people's lives, asking questions about work-life balance, reviewing our leave policies, actually enforcing the rules about taking vacation." Marcus gave him a knowing look. "Word is you're the reason for that." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Come on. Everyone knows Isabella personally intervened to get you on my team. And right after that, she started making changes across the whole company. Not exactly subtle." "I didn't ask for any of that." "Nobody said you did. But whatever happened between you two in Denver kicked something loose. And honestly, I'm glad. This place needed it." The conversation moved on to performance metrics and project timelines, but Daniel's brain was stuck on what Marcus had said. Everyone knew, which meant everyone was watching to see if he deserved the special treatment, if he'd crash and burn, if Isabella's faith in him was justified or just a wealthy person's whim. No pressure. After the meeting ended, Daniel walked back to headquarters instead of driving. The October air was crisp, leaves starting to turn, that particular quality of light that meant winter was coming. He thought about the past 3 months, how much had changed, how much was still uncertain. The money situation had improved. Not fixed, but improved. He'd made actual dents in the credit card debt. The mortgage was current. Emma's school had a field trip coming up, and Daniel had said yes without having to check his bank account first. But there were other things that hadn't improved. The house still needed repairs he couldn't afford. His car was making a worrying noise that probably meant expensive mechanic visits. And some nights, when Emma was asleep and the house was too quiet, the loneliness hit him so hard he couldn't breathe. He missed Sarah. Missed having someone to share the small victories with, someone who'd understand why teaching Emma a C chord mattered more than any work presentation. The grief hadn't gone away. It had just made room for other things. His phone buzzed. "Isabella. Need to see you. My office. 2 p.m. Daniel's stomach clenched. That didn't sound good. He typed back. "Everything okay?" "Fine. Just need to discuss something." He spent the next 3 hours trying to focus on work and failing completely. By 1:45, he'd given up and headed to the 30th floor early. Miranda, Isabella's assistant waved him toward the office. Go ahead in. She's expecting you. Isabella was standing by her windows again, looking out at the city. She didn't turn around when Daniel entered. Close the door, she said. He did, feeling like he was back in that hotel room in Denver, off balance and uncertain. What's going on? I'm implementing a new company policy. Flexible work arrangements for any employee with dependent care responsibilities. Children, elderly parents, disabled family members, doesn't matter. If you need flexibility to take care of someone, you get it. Daniel blinked. That's huge. I know. HR says it'll be complicated to implement. Some managers are already pushing back. They think people will abuse it. Will they? Probably some will, but I'd rather deal with a few bad actors than force everyone to choose between their jobs and their families. Isabella finally turned around. I'm announcing it Monday, company-wide meeting, and I want you there. Why? Because you're the reason I'm doing this. Because your story matters. Because if I'm going to make this case to 1,700 employees, some of them need to see that it actually works. Daniel's hands had gone cold. You want me to speak? In front of everyone? No, I just want you there. Visible. A data point that proves this isn't just corporate nonsense. Isabella, I'm not... People already think I got special treatment. If I'm standing up there with you, they're right. You did get special treatment. And you know what? You deserved it. You're a good employee who was burning out because our systems were broken. I fixed it for you. Now I'm fixing it for everyone else. She crossed her arms. Unless you'd rather I not mention you at all. I can do this without using you as an example. Daniel thought about that. About all the other people like him. Single parents, caregivers, people struggling to keep all the pieces of their lives from falling apart. About what it might mean for them to hear that someone with power actually gave a damn. Okay, he said. I'll be there. Good. Meetings at 10 a.m. in the main auditorium. Don't be late. Daniel started to leave, then paused. Can I ask you something? Isabella sighed. That's still your favorite question. Are you okay? You seem... What? I don't know. Stressed? More than usual? She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I'm about to upend how this company operates and piss off half my management team in the process. Of course I'm stressed. Is it worth it? Ask me in 6 months. Isabella sat down at her desk, suddenly looking exhausted. 3 senior managers quit this week. 2 more are probably on their way out. They think I've lost my edge, that I'm going soft. Have you? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just done pretending that grinding people into dust is the only way to build something successful. She rubbed her temples. My board is not happy. They think employee satisfaction and productivity are inversely correlated. What do you think? I think people do better work when they're not terrified and exhausted, but I don't have data to prove it yet. That's the gamble. Daniel thought about the past 3 months, how much more focused he'd been, how much better his work had gotten when he wasn't constantly panicking about Emma or money or whether he'd still have a job tomorrow. For what it's worth, he said, I'm more productive now than I was before. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. That's what I'm counting on. Isabella looked at him. Monday, I'm going to stand in front of everyone and tell them we're changing, that we're going to be the kind of company that doesn't force people to sacrifice everything. And some of them are going to think I'm lying. Some of them are going to wait for the catch. What do you want me to do? Just show up. Let them see that someone actually benefited from this, that it's real. Okay, I can do that. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, threatening rain. Daniel dropped Emma at school and drove to headquarters with his stomach in knots. The main auditorium was already filling up when he arrived. Employees from every department, every level, all wondering why the CEO had called an emergency meeting. Marcus found him in the crowd. You know what this is about? Yeah, she's announcing a new flexible work policy. How do you know that? She told me Friday. Marcus gave him a long look. You two really do talk, don't you? Sometimes. Huh. Marcus didn't sound upset, just thoughtful. Well, this should be interesting. The auditorium filled to capacity. Daniel found a seat near the middle, trying not to think about how many people were here, how many would be listening when Isabella made her announcement. At 10 a.m. exactly, Isabella walked onto the stage. No fanfare, no introduction, just her in a dark suit and heels, carrying a wireless mic. The room went silent. "I'm going to keep this brief," she said. "We all have work to do, but there are some things I need to say, and all of you need to hear them." She had the room's complete attention. Daniel had seen Isabella give presentations before, but this was different. She wasn't selling anything. She was just talking. 8 years ago, when I started this company, I had a very specific vision of what success looked like. Work harder than everyone else, want it more. Sacrifice everything for the mission. That's how I built Laurent Industries. That's how we became what we are today. She paused. And I was wrong. A murmur went through the crowd, people shifting in their seats, exchanging glances. Not wrong about working hard, Isabella continued. Not wrong about excellence, but wrong about what we were asking people to sacrifice to get there. I built a company culture that made it impossible to be a good employee and a good parent, a good employee and a good caregiver, a good employee and a complete human being. She walked across the stage, and Daniel could see some of the exhaustion he'd noticed on Friday, still there in her face. 3 months ago, one of our employees had to choose between being at a conference I wanted him to attend and being with his sick daughter. He chose the conference because he was terrified he'd lose his job if he didn't. And when I found out, I realized I'd created a system where that fear was justified. Daniel's face went hot. People were looking around trying to figure out who she was talking about. He kept his eyes on the stage, so I made a change for that one employee. I told him to go home. I gave him flexibility. I moved him to a position that valued his skills without destroying his life. Isabella stopped center stage. And you know what happened? His work improved significantly because people do better when they're not running on fear and exhaustion. She let that sink in for a moment. Effective immediately, Laurent Industries is implementing a comprehensive flexible work policy. Any employee with dependent care responsibilities, children, elderly parents, disabled family members, can request flexible arrangements, work from home options, adjusted hours, whatever you need to do your job and take care of your people. The murmur got louder. Some people looked excited, others skeptical. A few managers in the front row looked openly angry. "I know what some of you are thinking," Isabella said. "This is going to be abused. People will take advantage. Productivity will drop. And you know what? Maybe some of that will happen. But I'd rather deal with a few bad actors than continue forcing everyone to pretend they don't have lives outside this building." She pulled out her phone, glanced at it, put it away. "This isn't about being nice. This isn't about making friends. This is about building a sustainable company that doesn't burn through good people and spit them out. It's about being smarter than I've been for the past 8 years. Isabella's voice had gotten harder. "And if you can't manage a team under these new policies, if you need fear and constant availability to get results, then you're not as good a manager as you think you are." That landed like a bomb. Several managers in the front row actually stood up and walked out. Isabella watched them go without comment. "HR will send out implementation details by end of week. If you have questions, ask them. If you need accommodations, request them. If you think this is going to make the company weak, prove me wrong with your performance." She paused. "We're going to be better than we were, and it starts now." She walked off the stage to scattered applause that grew louder as people processed what she'd just said. Daniel sat frozen in his seat, aware that people around him were talking, debating, already forming opinions about whether this was brilliant or insane. Marcus leaned over. "Well, that's going to shake things up." "Yeah." "Did you know she was going to be that direct?" "No." "Good for her." Marcus stood up. "Come on, let's get out of here before someone recognizes you as the employee she was talking about." Too late. Jennifer had already put it together. She caught up with them in the hallway. "That was you, wasn't it? The employee with the sick daughter?" Daniel hesitated. "Yeah." "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" So Daniel told her. The abbreviated version: conference in Denver, Emma getting sick, Isabella showing up at his hotel room, the impossible choice that turned out not to be impossible after all. Jennifer listened with her arms crossed, nodding slowly. "Damn, no wonder she's doing all this." "You think it'll actually work?" Daniel asked. "I don't know, but I hope so. I've got 2 kids and a husband who travels for work, and some weeks I'm barely holding it together." She smiled. "It'd be nice if holding it together wasn't the only option. Over the next few weeks, the changes rippled through Laurent Industries like aftershocks from an earthquake. Some managers adapted, others quit. HR processed dozens of requests for flexible arrangements, parents who wanted to work from home more, caregivers who needed adjusted hours, people who'd been quietly struggling and finally had permission to ask for help. Productivity didn't drop. If anything, it improved. People who weren't constantly stressed about logistics had more energy for actual work. The company's quarterly numbers actually went up. But not everything was smooth. Some employees did abuse the policy. Some managers struggled to adapt. There were growing pains, complaints, a few lawsuits from managers who claimed they'd been forced out for disagreeing with the new direction. Isabella handled it all with the same ruthless efficiency she'd always had, just pointed in a different direction. She fired people who couldn't make it work. She promoted people who could. She sat in on department meetings and asked hard questions about why certain teams were struggling with flexibility when others thrived. And through it all, she kept checking in with Daniel. Not every day, not even every week, but enough that he started to understand this wasn't just about him. He was a test case, proof of concept, the data point she needed to justify what she was building. It should have felt like pressure. Somehow it didn't. 6 months after that knock on his hotel room door, Daniel was sitting in Emma's school auditorium watching her class perform a holiday concert. Emma had a solo, just 4 lines in a song about snowflakes, but she'd been practicing for weeks. His phone buzzed during the performance. He ignored it until intermission, then checked. Isabella. How's the concert? Daniel smiled. She nailed her solo, didn't forget a single word. Good for her. Tell her I said congratulations. You know that's weird, right? My boss congratulating my 7-year-old on her school concert? I've been called worse things than weird. Daniel pocketed his phone as the second half of the concert started. Emma spotted him in the audience and waved, nearly dropping her cardboard snowflake prop. He waved back, and the look of pure joy on her face made everything worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every impossible choice that had led to this moment. After the concert ended, Emma ran up to him in the lobby, still wearing her construction paper crown. Did you see me, Daddy? Did you see? I saw everything, baby. You were perfect. Can Grandma come to dinner? I want to tell her about the solo. Yeah, we can invite Grandma. They picked up Carol on the way home, stopped for pizza, and ate around Daniel's kitchen table while Emma recounted every detail of the concert in excruciating detail. Carol caught Daniel's eye across the table and smiled. Later, after Emma was in bed and Carol had gone home, Daniel sat on his back porch with his guitar. He'd been playing more lately, not every day, but enough that his fingers had stopped hurting, enough that the music felt natural again. He played for a while, working through a song he was trying to write. The melody was there, but the lyrics kept escaping him. Something about loss and change and learning to build a different kind of life than the one you'd planned. His phone buzzed. Isabella again. Question for you. Shoot. Do you ever regret it? Taking the promotion? Letting me change your trajectory? Daniel thought about how to answer that. No. Why? Because I've been wondering if I did the right thing, making you the face of all this change without really asking if you wanted to be. You gave me a choice. I took it. Did I, though? Or did I just make you an offer you couldn't refuse and call it a choice? Daniel put down his guitar and really thought about that. Had he had a choice? Or had he just been so desperate, so exhausted that any lifeline looked like salvation? I think, he typed slowly, you gave me options I didn't know I could have. That's not the same as forcing me into something. Semantics. Maybe. But I'm happier now than I was 6 months ago. Emma's happier. That counts for something. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before Isabella's response came through. I'm trying to figure out if I'm building something better or just assuaging my guilt about my father. Why can't it be both? Because one is about the company and one is about me. And I'm supposed to be smart enough to tell the difference. Daniel leaned back in his chair, looking up at the stars barely visible through the light pollution. You want my actual opinion? Sure. I think you're building something better and working through your guilt. I think those things don't cancel each other out. And I think you're allowed to be a person with regrets who's also trying to do the right thing. A long pause. Then, that's annoyingly insightful. I've had a lot of time to think about it. Being a single parent is basically one long exercise in figuring out how to be imperfect and still show up. Is that what I'm doing? Showing up imperfectly? Yeah. And it's working. Another pause. Thank you, Daniel. For what? For answering a door at 2 a.m. when you probably should have told me to go away. Daniel smiled. Thank you for knocking. The conversation ended there. Daniel sat on his porch for another hour, playing guitar and thinking about all the small moments that added up to change. A phone call overheard in a hotel lobby. A knock in the middle of the night. A choice to trust instead of fear. None of it had been smooth. None of it had been perfect. But it had been real, and that mattered more than perfection ever could. A year after Denver, Daniel was promoted to team lead. He almost said no. The extra responsibility, the extra hours, the fear that he'd end up right back where he started, choosing between work and Emma. But Marcus promised it wouldn't be like that. And Isabella backed him up, made it clear that team lead didn't mean sacrificing the flexibility he'd fought for. It just meant more responsibility within the boundaries he'd set. So Daniel said yes. And it was hard, but it was manageable hard. The kind of hard that came from growth instead of desperation. Emma turned 8. Started taking guitar lessons from a teacher Daniel found who made house calls. Got interested in science, in reading, in 1,000 small things that Daniel actually had time to notice and encourage. The financial situation stabilized. Not wealthy, not even comfortable by most standards, but stable, predictable. No longer the constant low-grade panic of wondering which bill to pay late this month. And slowly, carefully, Daniel started to let himself imagine a future that included something other than survival. Maybe dating again someday. Maybe building something new while honoring what he'd lost. Maybe just being okay with being enough instead of constantly failing to be everything. Isabella's changes rippled outward. Other companies started implementing similar policies, citing Laurent Industries as proof that flexibility didn't kill productivity. Business magazines ran articles about her transformation from ruthless CEO to, and Daniel found this hilarious, compassionate leader. Isabella called him after that particular article came out. Compassionate leader, she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. They make me sound like a kindergarten teacher. Better than ruthless billionaire. Debatable. At least ruthless billionaire was accurate. You're still ruthless. You just aim it at different targets now. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. They talked more now, not just about work, but about life, about Emma's latest school project, about Isabella's struggle to figure out who she was when she wasn't just the company, about grief and change and the strange ways people tried to outrun their regrets. Sometimes Daniel wondered if they were friends. It seemed impossible, billionaire CEO and mid-level team lead, completely different worlds. But then Isabella would text him some dry observation about a board meeting, or he'd send her a photo of Emma's latest art project, and it felt like something that didn't have a neat label. Just two people who'd collided at the right moment and somehow helped each other become better versions of themselves. 2 years after that knock on his hotel room door, Daniel was sitting in his backyard on a Saturday afternoon watching Emma practice guitar when his phone rang. Isabella's name on the screen. Hey, he answered. What's up? I need your advice on something. Shoot. I'm thinking about stepping down as CEO, moving to chairman of the board, letting someone else actually run the company. Daniel nearly dropped his phone. What? Why? Because I've spent 15 years building this thing, and I'm tired. Because I want to travel. Because I've been thinking about my father and how he died at 59 and I'm 42 and maybe I should actually live while I still can. She paused. And because I think the company will be fine without me. Better than fine, actually. When are you thinking? End of the year. That gives me 6 months to transition, train my replacement, make sure everything I've changed sticks. Who's replacing you? Don't know yet. Maybe Marcus, maybe someone from outside. I'm still deciding. She went quiet. What do you think? Daniel watched Emma struggle through a chord progression, her tongue sticking out in concentration, the same way it had when she was coloring dragons and robots. I think you should do whatever makes you happy. You've earned that. I don't know if I know how to be happy. Then figure it out. You're smart. You'll manage. That got a laugh. You know, most people don't talk to me like this. Most people are scared of you. Are you? Daniel thought about that. Not anymore. I was in Denver. Terrified, actually, but not now. Good. Fear is exhausting. Yeah, it really is. They talked for another few minutes, and then Isabella had to go. Another meeting, another crisis, another day of running a company that maybe she didn't want to run forever. After she hung up, Daniel sat in his yard and thought about change, about how it happened slowly and then all at once, about how a single moment of kindness could ripple outward in ways you'd never predict. That evening, Emma asked him about his friend on the phone. "Is that your boss?" she wanted to know. "Sort of. She used to be my boss. Now we just talk sometimes." "About what?" "Life stuff, work stuff, how to be better at things." Emma thought about that while eating her dinner. "She sounds nice," Daniel smiled. "Yeah, she is, even though she'd probably hate being called nice." "Why?" "Because nice sounds weak, and she spent a long time trying not to be weak." "That's sad." "Yeah, baby, it kind of is." Later, after Emma was asleep, Daniel pulled out the photo he'd kept from that first flight home from Denver. The sunrise over clouds, taken through an airplane window while he raced back to his daughter. He'd never posted it anywhere, never shown it to anyone, just kept it on his phone as a reminder of the moment everything changed. He looked at it now and thought about all the different ways people showed up for each other. Sometimes it was grand gestures, billionaires knocking on doors in the middle of the night, changing company policies, upending their own lives to build something better. Sometimes it was small things, making pancakes shaped like cartoon characters, teaching guitar chords, being present for a school concert. Both mattered. Both counted. The world didn't change because people were perfect. It changed because they were imperfect and tried anyway. 3 years after Denver, Daniel got a call from Isabella. She was in Rome, she said. Decided to take that trip she'd been talking about. Was thinking about her father and what it meant to actually live instead of just work. "I'm eating gelato at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday," she told him. "Haven't checked my work email in 4 days. It's completely terrifying." "Good. Terrifying or bad terrifying? I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." Daniel laughed. "Enjoy your gelato." "How's Emma?" "Good. She's 10 now. Started middle school this year. Hates it with the intensity of 1,000 suns." "That sounds developmentally appropriate." "Yeah, it's awful and also completely normal." They talked for a while longer, and then Isabella had to go. A cooking class she'd signed up for because apparently that's what people did when they weren't running companies. After they hung up, Daniel thought about how strange it was that a single phone call overheard in a hotel lobby 3 years ago had led to this. To Isabella in Rome eating gelato. To Daniel with a job he actually liked and time with his daughter and a life that felt like living instead of just surviving. He thought about all the people at Laurent Industries who'd benefited from the changes she'd made, the parents who could actually show up for their kids, the caregivers who didn't have to choose between family and employment, the employees who were valued as whole people instead of just productivity metrics. None of it was perfect. There were still struggles, still hard days, still moments when everything felt like too much. But it was better. Measurably, meaningfully better. And it had started with one person choosing to care. Years later, when Emma was older and asked about that time in Daniel's life, he tried to explain it. The fear, the exhaustion, the impossible choices, and then the knock on the door that changed everything. "What did you learn?" Emma wanted to know. Daniel thought about that. "I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do is see you struggling and choose to help instead of judge. I learned that kindness isn't weakness, and I learned that change is possible, even when it seems impossible." Because of your boss? Because of a lot of things. But yeah, she started it. Do you still talk to her? Sometimes. Mostly text these days. She's busy doing her own thing. Emma nodded, processing this. "I'm glad she knocked on your door." "Yeah, baby. Me too." Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not perfection, not having all the answers, just showing up when it counted, choosing kindness over convenience, believing that people were worth more than their productivity. Isabella had learned that from losing her father. Daniel had learned it from almost losing himself. And together, accidentally, they'd built something that let other people learn it too. The world was still hard, still full of impossible choices and crushing pressure and systems designed to grind people down. But somewhere in Hartford, there was a company that had chosen to be different. And somewhere in Rome, there was a woman who decided that building an empire wasn't worth losing yourself in the process. And somewhere in a small house with an overgrown lawn, there was a father and daughter making dinner together with enough time to actually be present for it. Small changes, small kindnesses, small moments that added up to something bigger. Daniel had stopped looking for the catch, had stopped waiting for everything to fall apart. Because he'd learned that sometimes, not always, not even usually, but sometimes, when someone powerful chose to care, they meant it. And that single choice could change everything.